The face-soul connection, beyond first impressions. Have you ever met someone, and in the very first seconds, you thought you had them all figured out? Maybe it was the way they dressed, the way they smiled, or didn't smile. Maybe you noticed a wrinkle, a scar, or the tiredness in their eyes, and your mind instantly painted a story about who they are. We do this all the time, often without realizing it. But what if I told you that the face you see is only the first page of a much deeper book? Our culture teaches us to make quick judgments. First impressions are often celebrated as accurate, even decisive. Trust your gut, we are told. And yes, sometimes our instincts are right, but sometimes they're just a reflection of our own biases, fears, and expectations. When we judge someone by their appearance alone, we are not really seeing them. We are seeing the filter of our own mind. There's a saying in many Eastern traditions, the face is the mirror of the heart. Not in the shallow sense of beauty, but in the way a life lived leaves traces, gentleness etching softness around the eyes, resilience carving lines of quiet strength along the jaw. Over years, the inner world writes itself onto the outer one. But here's the truth, you can't read that script in a glance. It takes time. It takes presence. I remember meeting an elderly man at a small tea shop in Kyoto. At first glance, he seemed stern, almost unapproachable. His gaze was sharp, his movements precise. My mind whispered, strict, probably cold. But when we began to talk, I learned he had spent decades as a school teacher, quietly paying for the education of children from poor families. His stern face wasn't the sign of coldness. It was the armor of someone who had faced hardship but never stopped giving. If I had walked away after that first impression, I would have missed the warmth hidden beneath his weathered features. This is the subtle dance between face and soul. Yes, the outer form can reflect the inner life, but only when we look with patience and openness. First impressions are like the cover of a book. You might guess the genre, but you don't truly know the story until you've read a few chapters. Here's the challenge. In our fast-paced world, we rarely give ourselves the time to read those chapters. Social media has trained us to swipe left or right in milliseconds. Business culture encourages reading the room instantly. And yet, human beings are more than snapshots. We are novels, filled with twists, contradictions, and unexpected beauty. So how do we go beyond first impressions? The first step is to slow down. When you meet someone, notice your initial reaction, but don't cling to it. Ask yourself, what might I not be seeing yet? This simple question opens the door to curiosity instead of judgment. Second, listen deeply, not just to words, but to tone, pauses, and what's left unsaid. A face can carry tension that's not from arrogance, but from grief. A smile can be genuine and tired at the same time. Third, let your own presence be open. People can sense when they're being judged. They can also sense when they're being truly seen. Sometimes, the way you look at someone gives them permission to reveal a more authentic part of themselves. And here's something interesting I've learned from both Buddhist teachings and modern psychology. When you look beyond the surface of others, you also start to see beyond the surface of yourself. We all have our own face we present to the world, sometimes confident, sometimes guarded, sometimes hiding behind politeness. When we slow down enough to connect soul to soul with another person, we start to dissolve the masks on both sides. Think of someone in your life you once misjudged. Maybe a coworker you thought was unfriendly turned out to be deeply loyal. Or a neighbor you barely noticed became a trusted friend. What changed? Not their face, not their basic appearance. What changed was the depth of your understanding, the shift from a glance to a genuine seeing. In the end, the face-soul connection isn't just about reading others. It's about remembering that everyone you meet is carrying a story you can't fully know at first sight. Every wrinkle, every scar, every shade of expression is a chapter. And those chapters deserve to be read with patience, empathy, and respect. So, the next time you meet someone, pause. Look again. Let your eyes soften. Let your heart listen. Because beyond the surface, beyond the first impression, there's always more to the human face, and always more to the human soul. And maybe, just maybe, in learning to see others in this way, you'll discover that you've been longing to be seen the same way yourself. The face-soul connection, beyond the surface. Have you ever met someone and instantly formed an opinion, only to realize later you were completely wrong? Maybe you thought they were cold, only to discover their warmth. Or you assumed they were confident, only to learn they were quietly battling self-doubt. It happens more than we like to admit. We meet a face, and our mind races to fill in the rest of the story. But here's the thing, what we are seeing is often just the cover, not the book. And covers, as you know, can be misleading. What if the face isn't just a mask, but a subtle map to the soul, if we learn how to read it? And not in some mystical fortune teller way, but through patient, human observation, the kind that goes deeper than first impressions. Our culture trains us to decide quickly. First impressions are celebrated as sharp intuition. In business, in dating, even in casual social settings, we are told, trust your gut. And sure, instincts can be powerful, but they can also be lazy. They often pull from stereotypes, half-memories, and fears, rather than truth. I remember when I first moved to a new city, I met a neighbor who barely spoke to me for weeks. I thought, well, she's probably unfriendly. Maybe she doesn't like strangers. Months later, I learned she was caring for her sick mother, juggling 2 jobs, and barely had the energy to greet anyone. She wasn't cold, she was exhausted. My accurate first impression? Completely wrong. There's a phrase in many Eastern traditions, the face is the mirror of the heart. But that mirror isn't always clean at first glance. Time, life, and even pain can blur the reflection. Some people hide their gentleness under a serious expression. Others mask their sadness with a constant smile. If we want to truly see someone, we need to slow down and notice the details. The way their eyes soften when they talk about something they love, or how their hands fidget when they're unsure. These are the lines and textures that reveal the soul, far beyond a single expression. Think about it. Our faces are like living canvases. Every joy leaves a mark. Every heartbreak leaves a trace. The curve of a smile might hold years of laughter. A furrowed brow might carry decades of responsibility. But to read these maps, you need patience. You can't just glance. You have to be with the person, even in silence. In my travels, I once met an elderly fisherman on a quiet pier. His skin was weathered by sun and saltwater, his eyes deep-set from years of watching horizons. At first, I thought he looked distant, almost unapproachable. But when I asked about the sea, his face lit up, lines reshaping into warmth, his voice carrying the rhythm of tides. That's when I realized, the surface is just a moment, the soul is the story underneath. But here's the challenge. Modern life doesn't encourage this kind of seeing. Social media trains us to judge in milliseconds. Apps reward snap decisions. Our attention span has been sliced into pieces. Yet if we always move at that speed, we'll never see past the cover. We'll never learn that the quiet coworker is a brilliant artist, or that the serious neighbor bakes cookies for the kids on the block every weekend. So maybe it's time to slow down. The next time you meet someone, try this. Notice your first reaction, but treat it as just a starting point, not the truth. Ask yourself, what might I not be seeing yet? Let curiosity replace certainty. Instead of assuming, invite discovery. Because when you look past the surface, people surprise you. And here's the unexpected bonus. The more you do this with others, the more you do it with yourself. You start to realize you also have a face you present to the world. Sometimes confident, sometimes guarded, sometimes hiding. And when you give people the grace to be more than their cover, you give yourself that same grace. I'd like you to think of someone in your life right now. Someone you've already labeled in your mind, good or bad, warm or cold. What if you gave yourself the gift of looking again? Not with suspicion, but with openness. What might you discover about them? About yourself? In the end, the connection between face and soul is not about decoding some hidden secret. It's about remembering that behind every expression is a whole lifetime. A lifetime that cannot be reduced to a glance. So, let's stop living like we are flipping through people as if they're profiles on a screen. Let's start reading the chapters, slowly, with interest, with empathy. Because beyond the surface, beyond the first impression, there's always more to see, and always more to love. If you can, carry this thought with you. Every person you meet is more than the moment you meet them. Look again. Listen deeper. You might just find that the soul you're meeting is far more beautiful than the face that first greeted you. They say, don't judge a book by its cover. We've all heard it. And yet, I want to invite you to entertain a different question today. What if the cover, our face, isn't just a surface, but a doorway? What if it quietly carries truths about the book, our soul, that words can't always capture? Now, I'm not talking about stereotypes or snap judgments. I'm not saying you can look at someone and instantly decide who they are. That's shallow. But there's a deeper, more mysterious connection here, one that cultures across history have quietly acknowledged. The Chinese have a saying, Tam Sin Tianji, the mind gives birth to the face. In other words, our inner world slowly writes itself on our outer features. Think about it. The warmth in a grandmother's smile that seems to wrap you in comfort before she says a single word, or the way a person's eyes can reveal exhaustion, even if they're dressed to perfection. Over the years, emotions we carry often leave traces. Not just wrinkles, but patterns of expression, a softness from a life of compassion, or a guardedness from years of pain. Science, too, hints at this. Researchers have found subtle links between facial expressions and emotional patterns, even between micromuscle tensions and our long-term mood states. Our body is a storyteller, and our face is one of its most eloquent pages. But here's the paradox. While our face may reflect our soul, it also shapes how the world responds to us, and in turn, how we see ourselves. Imagine someone who has spent years feeling undervalued. They might unconsciously carry a tension in their jaw, a guardedness in their gaze. Over time, those expressions become their resting face. Others pick up on that energy, sometimes reinforcing the very feelings that created it. It's a feedback loop between inner life and outer appearance. The beautiful thing is, this connection works both ways. Change your inner state, and your face will follow. A person who has walked through fire but chosen forgiveness often radiates a calm strength that no makeup, no filter, can imitate. You've probably met someone like this. They're not conventionally beautiful in the magazine sense, but you can't stop looking at them. They glow with something deeper: presence, authenticity, peace. So maybe the old saying needs an update. Don't judge a book by its cover, but do read it. Gently, with curiosity. Because sometimes the lines around someone's eyes are not just marks of age, but of thousands of moments spent laughing. Sometimes a furrowed brow tells the story of a mind that refuses to settle for easy answers. And sometimes the light in someone's face tells you they've discovered something priceless. That joy is an inside job. The next time you look in the mirror, notice your own cover. Not with criticism, but with compassion. Ask yourself, what is my face saying about the life I'm living? And even more importantly, what do I want it to say 10 years from now? Because while we can't control every line or shadow, we can shape the energy behind them. A mind at peace will slowly soften the edges. A heart full of gratitude will brighten the eyes. Over time, your soul will leave its signature on your face, and it will be more beautiful than anything you could buy. So yes, maybe we shouldn't judge a book by its cover, but perhaps we should listen to what the cover is quietly trying to tell us. The deceptive power of first impressions. We've all been there. That moment when you meet someone new, before they even speak, and your mind has already decided what kind of person they are. Maybe it's their clothes, their posture, the way they walked into the room. Your brain, without asking your permission, whispers, "I know exactly who this is." This is the power and the danger of first impressions. Scientists tell us it takes only a fraction of a second for the human brain to form a snap judgment. We are wired this way because, in ancient times, it helped us survive. You needed to know, instantly, if someone was a friend or a threat. That lightning-fast instinct could mean life or death. But here's the thing, in our modern world, those same instincts can lead us astray, causing us to misjudge people not based on their character, but on the tiniest, most superficial cues. And when I say astray, I mean spectacularly wrong. Think about those viral moments you've seen online. Someone judged as lazy, unprofessional, or unkind, only for the full story to reveal something completely different. Like the man in worn-out clothes sitting quietly in the back of a concert hall, who turns out to be the world-class violinist about to perform. Or the woman dismissed as unqualified in a meeting, who later delivers the most innovative idea the company has seen in years. These moments go viral because they break our assumptions wide open. They remind us that our first impression is not the whole truth. It's just the first page of a much bigger book. But why do we fall for this trap over and over again? The answer lies in something we don't like to admit: hidden bias. Every one of us, no matter how open-minded we believe we are, carries unconscious biases shaped by our upbringing, our culture, and the media we consume. Movies, ads, and TV shows subtly teach us what a successful person looks like, what a trustworthy face is supposed to be, even what kind of body language signals competence. Without realizing it, we measure people against these invisible templates. The trouble is, Those templates are often narrow, outdated, and deeply unfair. Think about it. How many potential friendships, partnerships, or opportunities have been lost because someone didn't look the part in the first 5 seconds? How many times have you written off a person, only to later realize they were nothing like you imagined? And here's the uncomfortable truth. It's not just about them. It's also about you. How many times have others misjudged you in those same 5 seconds? Maybe they saw you as aloof when you were just shy, or thought you were unprepared when you were actually quietly confident. Those moments can sting, because deep down, we know how unfair it is to be reduced to a single glance. But here's the hopeful part. Awareness is the first step to breaking the cycle. Once you realize your brain is wired for snap judgments, you can slow it down. You can train yourself to move from "I already know who they are" to "I wonder who they really are." That tiny shift, from assumption to curiosity, can change the way you see people and the way they experience you. It's a little like turning down the volume on that inner commentator who's always so quick to categorize. Instead, you give yourself and others the gift of time. Time to speak. Time to listen. Time to reveal what's beneath the surface. I've started practicing this myself. When I catch my brain jumping to conclusions, I silently ask, what else could be true? If someone seems unfriendly, maybe they're just having a hard day. If they seem disinterested, maybe they're nervous. This isn't about making excuses. It's about giving space for the full picture to emerge before you lock someone into a single story. Because here's the truth. When we judge less, we connect more. We stop missing out on the extraordinary people who don't fit our mental molds. We start noticing the quiet ones, the unconventional ones, the ones who surprise us in the best possible ways. And we also give others the chance to see us more fully, beyond whatever assumptions they made in those first few seconds. So, the next time you meet someone new, resist the urge to seal the verdict instantly. Think of that moment not as the final judgment, but as the opening scene of a story you're about to read. You might just discover that some of the most life-changing connections start in the very people you least expected. And who knows, maybe someone will say the same about you someday. Beyond the surface, the soul's subtle language. Have you ever met someone whose words said one thing, but something deep inside you felt another story? It's as if our souls have their own private language, whispering truths that can't always be wrapped neatly in sentences. You don't have to be a mind reader to sense it. You just have to pay attention. Let's start with the most obvious yet most overlooked, body language. We all know a polite smile. It's the one we flash when someone asks, "How are you?" And we reply, "I'm fine," even when we're not. But if you linger for just a moment longer, you can see the truth beneath it. Shoulders slightly slumped, fingers fidgeting, a subtle shift in posture, as if their body is quietly confessing, "I'm tired. I'm overwhelmed. I need someone to see me." Think about the last time you asked someone if they were okay, and they smiled, but something in your gut whispered, "No, they're not." That wasn't magic. That was your intuition reading their body language. Here's the thing, bodies rarely lie. Even when the mind tries to dress up reality with polite gestures, the body leaks out the truth in small, unguarded movements. And when you learn to notice them, not to judge, but to understand, you start to hear people in a way most of the world misses. Then there are the eyes. We've all heard the saying, the eyes are the windows to the soul. It's not just poetic, it's practical wisdom. When you lock eyes with someone, even for a few seconds, 1,000 unspoken words pass between you. Happiness has a sparkle to it, almost like sunlight dancing on water. Sadness, it dims that light, pulling it inward. And then there are the eyes that hold storms, anger, hurt, or fear, no matter how still the rest of the face appears. Micro-expressions, those tiny flashes of emotion that cross the face for just a fraction of a second, are one of the clearest signs of the soul's language. A twitch of the brow, a momentary tightening around the mouth. They're over almost before you notice them, but they speak volumes. If you've ever been in a conversation and felt someone's expression shift so quickly you couldn't even name it, you've caught a glimpse of that deeper truth. I remember once, a friend told me she was completely fine after a breakup. Her words were steady, her smile practiced. But for just half a second, her eyes glistened, just enough for me to see the truth. In that moment, I didn't need her to say anything more. I simply reached out, held her hand, and let the silence speak for us both. And then there's the voice, that subtle but powerful carrier of truth. It's not just what people say, but how they say it. The rise and fall of tone, the pauses between words, the rhythm of speech, it's all part of the soul signature. Someone might speak with confidence, but if you listen closely, you might catch a tremor in their voice, a small vibration that hints at doubt or vulnerability. Or maybe you've noticed how a person's tone softens when they talk about something they love, like a parent describing their child, or a musician speaking about their craft. You can hear the heart in their voice, even if you don't know all the details. The cadence of speech also tells stories. Some people speak quickly, as if they're running from silence, afraid that a pause might reveal too much. Others speak slowly and deliberately, each word weighted with intention, like they're letting you peek into a more measured, thoughtful inner world. Here's the beauty in all of this. When you learn to listen beyond the surface, beyond words, you begin to connect with people on a soul-to-soul level. You stop hearing just what they say and start understanding who they are in that moment. You notice when a yes really means "I'm not sure," and when silence is not emptiness but a quiet cry for understanding. But this isn't just about reading others. It's also about becoming aware of the language your own soul is speaking. How often do you hide behind polite smiles? How often does your voice betray the feelings your words refuse to name? We spend so much of our lives trying to control the narrative we present to the world, but the truth is, our deeper selves are always finding ways to be heard. If you start noticing your own micro-expressions, your own shifts in tone, your own body's quiet signals, something magical happens. You begin to live more authentically. You begin to align the language of your soul with the words you speak and the life you live. So here's my invitation to you. This week, slow down. Watch. Listen. Not just to people's words, but to their pauses, their posture, their eyes, their tone. Let yourself be curious. Instead of jumping to respond, linger in observation. And notice what happens, not just in how you understand others, but in how they begin to feel truly seen by you. Because beneath the surface, every human being is speaking a second language, the soul's subtle language. And when you learn to hear it, you don't just understand people better, you connect with them in a way that feels rare, real, and profoundly human. Cultivating deeper understanding. Practical tools. We live in a world where opinions fly faster than facts. Social media scrolls by in seconds. News headlines flash across our screens. And somewhere in that rush, our ability to truly understand each other gets lost. But what if I told you there are simple, everyday tools, habits you can practice, that can slow things down and help you see people and situations with fresh eyes? Let's start with one of my favorites, the 3-second rule. It's not about food you drop on the floor, it's about your mind. The next time you're about to form an opinion, pause. Count slowly to 3. In those 3 seconds, ask yourself, what if I'm wrong? What's another angle here? Then, intentionally look for evidence that contradicts your first impression. It's amazing how quickly our brains jump to conclusions about a stranger's tone, a friend's text, a coworker's decision. That pause forces you to step out of automatic judgment and into curiosity. And curiosity is where understanding begins. I remember a time when I overheard someone speaking sharply to a barista. My first reaction, rude person. But then I paused. 3 seconds. I noticed their trembling hands, the dark circles under their eyes. Maybe they weren't rude. Maybe they were exhausted, maybe even in pain. That moment changed how I treated them, and sure enough, a few minutes later, I learned they'd just come from the hospital. The 3-second rule doesn't just make you a better thinker, it makes you a kinder human. The second tool is active listening beyond words. Most of us think we are listening when we are really just waiting for our turn to talk. But active listening asks you to go deeper, to tune into not just what someone is saying, but how they feel as they say it. Notice the tone of their voice, the rhythm of their speech, the pauses they take. Listen for what's not being said. Sometimes a sigh in the middle of a sentence says more than the words before and after it. It's like reading between the lines of a book, but the book is a living, breathing person sitting right in front of you. For example, maybe your friend tells you, work is fine. But you hear the way their voice drops on the word fine, or how they avoid eye contact as they say it. That's your cue to gently ask, are you sure? You seem off today. That single moment of seeing past the surface can open the door to a much deeper conversation. The third tool is what I like to call the curiosity challenge. It's simple, but not always easy. Once a week, seek out a conversation with someone you'd normally dismiss. The neighbor you've never talked to because you assume you have nothing in common. The coworker whose views make you roll your eyes. the person at the bus stop who seems lost in their own world. Your goal isn't to agree with them, it's to understand what life looks like through their eyes. I once struck up a conversation with a man at a park bench, someone I might have ignored on another day. I learned he was a retired firefighter, still haunted by certain calls he'd been on. That 10-minute talk didn't just change my afternoon, it reminded me that everyone is carrying a story you can't see from the outside. These 3 tools, the 3-second rule, active listening beyond words, and the curiosity challenge, are more than just techniques. They are invitations. Invitations to slow down in a world that constantly tells us to speed up. Invitations to replace judgment with wonder. Invitations to step outside of our own mental bubble and see life in its messy, beautiful complexity. The truth is, understanding doesn't happen by accident. It happens when we make a deliberate choice to look again, to give people the grace of being more than our first impression of them. And in a time when division feels louder than connection, that choice is powerful. So maybe this week, before you scroll past, before you interrupt, before you decide who someone is, try one of these tools. Count to 3. Listen for the feeling under the words. Talk to someone you'd usually ignore. See what changes. Because when you do, you'll discover something incredible. The world doesn't just get bigger, it gets richer. And the people you thought you understood, they might just surprise you. The ripple effect, benefits of true connection. We live in a time where we are more connected than ever. Thousands of contacts, endless followers, instant messages at our fingertips. And yet, many of us feel more alone than we'd like to admit. Why? Because connection isn't about the number of people who can reach us. It's about the depth of the relationships we actually share. When you move from surface-level interaction to true connection, something begins to shift, not just in your relationships, but in the way life itself unfolds. It's like dropping a stone into still water. The ripples spread far beyond that single point of contact. The first ripple, building stronger relationships. We all have acquaintances, people we say, "Hey, how are you?" to without really expecting an answer. But true connection means you go beyond that script. You start asking better questions. You make space for honest answers, even when they're messy. It's the difference between knowing someone's job title and knowing the story of why they chose that path. Between waving at your neighbor and actually learning their name, their struggles, their joys. I think about a coworker I once had. For years, we worked side by side but never spoke beyond the basics. Then one day, during a lunch break, I asked about a photo on his desk. He opened up about his sister, who had passed away, and how she had inspired him to pursue his career. That conversation changed how I saw him, and it changed how we worked together. We went from polite colleagues to trusted allies. That's the power of genuine connection. The second ripple, enhanced empathy and compassion. When you take the time to really see the human behind the words, something softens inside you. Even in disagreements, empathy makes it harder to write someone off as the other side. Maybe you've had a heated conversation with a friend about politics, values, or life choices. True connection doesn't mean you'll agree on everything. It means you care enough to listen beyond the argument. You start noticing the fears, hopes, and experiences that shape their beliefs. I've learned that compassion grows when you remember this simple truth. Everyone has a reason for being the way they are. You might not agree with that reason, but acknowledging it can transform tension into understanding. And when you approach people this way, you give them permission to extend that same grace to you. The third ripple, unlocking hidden opportunities. True connection has a way of opening doors you didn't even know existed. When you see people for who they truly are, and let them see you, hidden talents, wisdom, and possibilities begin to emerge. I once met a man at a community event who, at first glance, seemed quiet and reserved. In conversation, I learned he had spent 20 years in disaster relief work around the world. That single connection led to a collaboration on a humanitarian project that changed both our lives. You never know what someone carries within them, what skills, ideas, or insights are waiting to surface, until you take the time to look past the surface. Every person is a library of untold stories, and true connection is the key that unlocks them. And here's the thing, these ripples don't just stay in your relationships. They spread into every part of life. Stronger bonds lead to communities that feel safer. Empathy leads to workplaces that are kinder. Unexpected opportunities lead to a richer, more colorful life. So, how do you begin? You don't need a grand gesture. It starts with small, intentional acts. Ask one deeper question today. Listen without planning your reply. Notice the details, someone's tone, their expression, the way their hands move when they speak. And most importantly, be willing to share a little more of yourself, too. Connection is a two-way street, and vulnerability is often the bridge. This week, try to create at least one ripple. It could be with a friend you've drifted from, a family member you haven't called in a while, or even a stranger you meet in passing. You might be surprised by how far that ripple travels. Because at the heart of it, true connection isn't just about what you get from others, it's about what you give. It's about seeing someone fully and letting yourself be seen. And when you do that, you don't just change a moment. You change the whole current of someone's life, including your own. Embracing the journey, a call to conscious living. Life isn't just about moving forward, it's about waking up as you walk. And part of waking up means realizing how many of our ideas, beliefs, and judgments were never truly ours in the first place. They were handed to us, by family, by culture, by the stories we've been told since childhood. If we want to live consciously, we have to do something brave, unlearn. Not everything, but the parts of ourselves that are shaped by fear, stereotypes, or half-truths. This is a lifelong process, not a weekend self-help project. I've learned this the hard way. Years ago, I met a man at a networking event. He spoke in a blunt, almost curt manner, and my first thought was, he's arrogant. I kept my distance. But later, by pure chance, we ended up sitting next to each other at dinner. As we talked, I learned he had grown up in a war zone. That bluntness? It was the language of survival he had carried with him. Beneath, it was a deeply thoughtful, compassionate person who had seen more loss than I could imagine. If I had let my first impression win, I would have missed out on knowing someone extraordinary. Moments like that have taught me that conscious living means catching yourself in the act of assumption, and then asking, what else could be true here? Because the truth is, our biases don't always feel like biases. They feel like the way things are. And unless we challenge them, they quietly shape how we treat people, how we vote, how we love, and even how we see ourselves. One of the most beautiful and humbling parts of life is discovering how wrong you can be about someone, and how much better it feels to replace judgment with curiosity. Each time we do, we stretch the boundaries of our own humanity. And here's the thing, this isn't just about personal growth anymore. We are living in a time where connection is both easier and more fragile than ever. In the digital age, it's so tempting to reduce people to headlines, labels, or a handful of posts on a profile. We scroll, we skim, we categorize. But every time we do, we trade depth for speed. And speed can make us blind. The future of human connection depends on our willingness to slow down and look deeper. When we take the time to see beyond the surface, whether that's in person or online, we not only build stronger relationships, we also create a culture that values truth over assumption, understanding over division. Ask yourself, when was the last time you really saw someone? Not their clothes, not their job title, not the role they play in your life, but them. The person beneath all the outer layers. And when was the last time someone really saw you? Here's the quiet truth I've come to believe. Conscious living isn't about becoming perfect, it's about becoming aware. It's about noticing the filters in our minds, questioning them, and, when needed, replacing them with something truer, kinder, and more expansive. The journey will test you. You'll have moments when your old instincts kick in and you catch yourself judging before you even realize it. But that's not failure, that's progress. Awareness is the first step to change. So, as you move through your days, try this. Pause before forming conclusions. Ask one more question than you normally would. Give people a chance to reveal something you couldn't have guessed. Because every time you do, you're not just learning about them, you're also learning about yourself. The world doesn't need more quick opinions. It needs more deep seeing. More people willing to walk through life with open eyes, open ears, and open hearts. That's the call of conscious living, not to rush to the finish line, but to keep waking up along the way. And maybe, if enough of us answer that call, the future won't just be more connected, it will be more human.